Hello, welcome to Strategic Management. In this session, I'm going to be discussing corporate level strategy and the role of corporate parents. So there are two key questions in this topic. One is to understand the role of the corporate center, and the second is to understand how the portfolio is managed and what the logic of the portfolio of businesses managed by that corporate center. So, to understand the context, you'll be familiar with some of these corporations. Tata, $104 billion turnover, 100 plus companies. Some of those you'll be familiar with, maybe some not so familiar. General Electric of America, another very large corporation, turnover of 140 billion US dollars, and a number of divisions working in very different markets: aviation, healthcare, finance, and so forth. Tesco, you're probably familiar with, £54 billion turnover, and a range of different businesses within Tesco. Some you're familiar with: food, clothing, electricals, Tesco Bank. Maybe not so familiar with the business called dunnhumby. And then there's the Virgin Group, something around £19.5 billion turnover, with over 60 different companies in a wide variety of businesses. And you can understand from our previous discussion on diversification that within these corporations we can see different levels of relatedness, and certainly we can see a degree of unrelatedness between the businesses held by these corporations in their portfolios. So within these corporations we can discern different levels of strategy. Strategy has a different purpose at different levels. If we consider Unilever has got a number of divisions: food, refreshment, personal care, home care, and some of those products you'll be very familiar with. Those businesses are held within the same group, which is controlled by this small group of the corporate board and the executive leadership. So a very small group of people oversee, give direction to, manage and control 172,000 employees and 53 billion euros of sales spread over 190 different countries. So how do they do that, and what's the particular sorts of decisions that they have to take? So when we're talking about corporate level strategy, it's the decisions around what businesses should we keep in the portfolio, which businesses should we invest in, and which businesses perhaps should we be getting rid of, selling off, or closing down. You've already looked at the business level of strategy, how these individual divisions and individual businesses compete in the chosen markets. So what is it that goes on at this corporate level? What is it that the corporate board and the executive leadership team offers to the operating management in these different divisions? What makes a good parent or a bad parent? The objective of having a corporate center or a corporate parent is to create value through the businesses that they run throughout the group. And in order to do this, they need to provide certain facilities or assistance. The first thing that parents must do, or the corporate center must do, is envision. They must make it very clear what the purpose, what the values of the group are, and that needs to be clear to employees and to investors outside the organization. They will quite often provide coaching. They will manage the development of senior management, and they'll make sure that there's a good exchange of experience among those senior managers. Some firms, some large corporations, will have management development schemes, and they'll have senior management development schemes. They may even have their own university. There will be, at the center of the organization, there will be a number of corporate functions which are provided to all businesses within the portfolio. So from the perspective of Unilever, they have a very large central human resources function which recruits, trains and develops people for businesses throughout the organization. You'll notice if you apply to work for Unilever, you don't apply to one of the individual businesses, but you apply to the center of Unilever, and they will then eventually decide where to place you within the group. Another important aspect in terms of offering good support from the centre is the management of central research and development. So all the individual constituent businesses contribute their profit to the central pot, and that's used to develop new products and processes and technologies. And then the products of that development is available to all the various different businesses. And that gives a very cost-effective and a very focused level of research and development, which can give considerable competitive advantages to businesses within the corporation that might actually be smaller than their competitors, but they have access to much better financed research and development. A principal role of the central organization is to provide finance, particularly investment, for future growth of the different divisions, and the decisions on which business to invest on are crucial for the overall success of the organization. And the corporate parent must intervene at some times. They must clear out the businesses or the individuals which are not performing well, so they're not dragging down the overall group. From the operating business's perspective, the corporate parent may not be doing them any good if the overall corporate structure is simply adding lots and lots of cost and detracting from the profit which has been made in the divisions. Remember, the corporate parent is not actually profit making, it is simply a cost. So if that cost overcomes the value it's creating, then it's going to be a big negative factor for the operating managers. If the central processes create a huge amount of bureaucracy and complexity, they slow down communications, they slow down the flow of investment, just add complexity to the whole operation, then again it can be seen as value destroying, and there's no advantage created for the individual businesses. Even worse, from an external point of view, if the whole group is badly managed and is not clear where the good performing areas are and where the bad performing areas are, therefore they can't point to what's good and what's bad in the organization, they can't actually manage it properly, then again that leads to the conclusion that the parents are not operating in a way that's going to create value. It may well be, and we'll see this when we come to look at managing portfolios, that businesses that don't fit well into the portfolio will always view the central management team, the corporate parent, as a negative factor. They may feel overlooked and underinvested. So let's look at two different ways in which a corporate parent can manage the overall corporation. I'm going to consider two approaches, two styles of management. The way in which the corporate parent interacts with the operating businesses. And these are called either a portfolio management approach or a synergy management approach. Bear in mind that these aren't individual job titles. You won't find within a business a portfolio manager or a synergy manager. This is an overall approach or a philosophy which can be adopted in order to manage the portfolio of different businesses. And these two different approaches, portfolio and synergy, are really at opposite ends of a spectrum, and you might see different shades of these approaches within a particular division where they're managing a particular problem or opportunity. So looking at the portfolio manager first of all, a portfolio manager actually has a very small corporate center. There are a few people in the center making the decisions, and there are minimal central resources provided. The key role of a portfolio manager is to find underperforming businesses which they can acquire at a low price. Then they'll provide investment for growth, and those underperforming acquisitions may well come from other corporations which no longer wanted that business, and so therefore they weren't investing. The new portfolio manager can come along, buy it at a low price, and then they can provide that investment which the business has been seeking for some time. And they will provide incentives for the incumbent management, often a share of the business. So if they work well, if they work hard, and if they're successful, they can often earn very high sums of money, quite apart from getting the satisfaction of building that business that they've always wanted to build, but have been prevented from doing so because they were owned by a corporation that actually didn't see the sense of owning that business any longer. So because there is minimal operation involvement, the portfolio management team, the corporate center, have very, very little involvement day to day in the business. They may have no day-to-day business involvement whatsoever. They leave it purely up to the existing management. They've bought the business with the management because they want that management to run the business for them. And because they've got this minimal operation involvement, they don't have great experience across different businesses. And because they don't need to understand each individual business, they are leaving it to the incumbent management. Then often portfolio managers will have very highly diversified portfolios, and there are few, if any, links between the different businesses. Normally, the objective of a portfolio management approach is to buy at a low price, invest to improve performance, and eventually sell the business at a premium. So they make their money, A, by increasing the profitability over time, but principally by selling the improved business for a much higher price than they bought it. And this cycle might be 18 months, 3 years, or 5 years. Berkshire Hathaway is a very well-known portfolio management type business, but they have a very long-term view and often hold on to their businesses for a lot longer than other companies. Sim Ventures, a UK private equity firm, might take a much shorter view in terms of how long they want to hold on to their investment before they realize it and release that capital and share out the profits amongst themselves. At the other end of the spectrum, we have a synergy manager, and the synergy manager approach entails having a large corporate center, lots and lots of central resources, and a great emphasis on central control of the overall businesses, giving them direction, constant monitoring, very close direction in terms of even down to the level of which markets they want them to compete in, what sort of products they want them to be competing with. So there is a very close involvement between the corporate center, the executive leadership team, and those individual strategic business units. And in tandem with that, they do offer a great deal of central resources, lots and lots of training, lots and lots of enablement of transfer of people between different businesses, so importantly sharing experience across the group. And all this helps to promote synergies across the group, so that slightly cagey word, which I've mentioned before, a synergy manager looks for collaboration and sharing across the different businesses in order to achieve economies of scale, economies of scope, and to create competitive advantages which aren't available to smaller businesses which they may be competing with. So in this case, the strategic business units are highly related in terms of the diversification level. They're very similar products, very similar markets, similar customers, maybe similar technologies and resources are required to conduct the business of the different SBUs. And this, of course, makes it easier to move people around within the group. And Unilever is a fine example of synergy management. So that's the two broad approaches that we can see are used in terms of the relationship between the corporate parent and the operating businesses. In the next part of corporate level strategy, I'll be considering how the portfolio of businesses within the corporation are managed.